puberties. They are just kind of, they're transitioning from, that adolescent life stage into that young person's life stage, so to speak. And as teenage years, how many of us made a lot of bad decisions in our teenage years, okay? And how many of us made a lot of those bad decisions based on our emotions in those teenage years, okay? And so what happens is we make all those bad decisions in our teenage years, or some people later on in life have had something very tragic happen, something traumatic happen in their life, and then based on that trauma or that tragic situation, that emotional time in their life, they will make some very bad decisions. How many of us have heard of something called a midlife crisis?
Yeah.
All right, so midlife crisis, man, they were a great person until they hit 30 or 40 years old and something happened, and then it was major, and all of a sudden they began to just make one bad decision after the next, and it was all based on emotions. And so when we talk about effectually engaging your emotions, there's a reason why we're spending so many classes on these, because again, it's not like we're just making this up. You will never be able to be victorious in your life, and you may be able to be sober, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be victorious. I mean, if you can't get a handle on your emotions, or you can't overcome your emotions, or you can't be victorious in the area of your emotions, then you're going to have a real hard time being victorious in general altogether, okay? And so that's where we're going with all these. So trying to choose different emotions that are ones that we all battle, because I said that there's nothing new under the sun. Every one of us has a heart. All of us have all these emotions. None of us are exempt from them. Some of us are more susceptible to one than the other, but all of us are susceptible to emotions on the whole grand scheme of things, okay? So at any given day, any given moment, Timmy can, be overwhelmed with anger. At any given time, Brianna can be overwhelmed with depression. Something major could happen to Kevin, and he could all of a sudden become a very bitter, very unforgiving, very resentful individual. So it just kind of depends on where we're at in life and what is happening to us that is going to determine which emotion that we're dealing with. But if we try to hit as many of them as we can through these classes, and we've only got to think about, I think there's going to be 5 more classes dealing with these. And if you can get as much notes as you can, okay? If you don't have notes, chances are you won't be able to go back and look at what you need to look at when you're going through a time where you're dealing with one of these emotions. Because even if you catch it late, at least if you have something that you can use against it, you'll be in a much better place if you don't know what to do, right? So hopefully some of this will help you. So, all right, so effectually engaging the emotion of impatience. How many of y'all have dealt with impatience in your life, okay? This is a emotion, all right? And now patience is not, but impatience is, and I'll get there in just a little bit, okay? And we're trying to use this series of effectually engaging our emotions to help us to learn more about the part of us that tends to get the best of us and cause us to be the worst us that we can be, okay? Your addiction has probably aided, if you have an addiction, has probably aided in making you the worst version of yourself that you could ever be, okay? But before your addiction ever took you there, your emotions were already taking you there. The choices that you were making based on your emotions or following your heart were leading you to become that bad person long before the addiction entered in on the scene. All the addiction did was most of the times multiply what was already there, okay? Intensify what was already there. And it caused it to become a worser version, a worse version of what it was. Okay, so it just compounded the situation. That's all it did. And you use the addiction many times to try to pull yourself out of your emotions. Okay, so that you could feel peace, so that you could have some joy, which wasn't real peace, it wasn't real joy, so that you could feel better, so to speak, okay? And I just want to get us to see that, okay? And so it is all a matter of the heart, and so the heart, we're going to look at the heart of the matter, okay? Impatience is a matter of your heart, okay? It is an emotion that has been used by the enemy to control our emotions just about as much as any other emotion, causing us to make hasty decisions, right? Just do something without even giving it any thought whatsoever at all. Because if you had just thought about it maybe just a little bit, oh, it would have been a completely different decision. But man, you just jumped right into that one. It's like, oh man, if I would have just stood back and looked a little bit, I never would have done that. No, I mean, just a little bit of consideration, just a little bit of thought, maybe just not responding so quickly, so impatiently, you probably would have made a different decision altogether. Impulsive. The Bible calls it hasty. Very the same word. Rash. Thoughtless. They all fit in there, okay? Careless. How many of y'all make careless decisions? It's just like, man, I didn't even think about this at all. Okay, and so it is the emotion of impatience that causes us to respond this way. It is what makes us jump into the frying pan and turn around and jump out of the frying pan and into the fire. Got to get out of this. Well, maybe you shouldn't do that. But impatience causes you to go from one to the next. The next thing you know, the last 50 decisions that you made were all made from the emotion of impatience. And man, it's just like, good night, dude. How did I, get so far down so quickly? Impatience. God gives us a counter emotion. You can write this down. For all the emotions that we deal with. And He gives us a counter emotion for the emotion of impatience. Okay? So the God emotion for our emotion of impatience is long-suffering. Write that down. We don't like difficult. We don't like uncomfortable. We don't like any kind of affliction. We don't like any kind of pain. We don't like it. And so because we don't like it, we normally will respond impatiently to anything of the sort. Okay? And God says, listen, I know you don't like any of that stuff. But I've given you a God emotion to deal with all of that stuff, and that is long-suffering, okay? And it comes through the Holy Spirit. We'll talk about that more when we give you the battle strategy or the biblical execution of your impatience, which is exactly what needs to happen. You need to die to it, but we'll get there. But just know that God has given you the counteractive emotion to deal with your impatience, okay? And so it's obviously gotten the best of God's people throughout the Bible, because throughout the Bible God tells His people to be patient. We'll look at that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the biblical explanation of impatience. Okay, I've already told you that it's the same word as hasty, but I'm going to give you the biblical explanation or definition of impatience. Write it down so that you can. The importance of having the definition or the explanation and writing it down is so that you can realize when you're being affected by it, okay? Because, what do they give you when you go to a doctor's office and you are dealing with depression? They begin to tell you what the symptoms are, right? So that you can know when I'm fixing to go into a bout of depression. Or if, let's just say they were going to try to figure out if you got COVID or not. They look for all the symptoms, right? So you know what to look for to say if somebody's got COVID. So if you know what to look for, when it's coming on, then you can go ahead and catch it earlier rather than later. I mean, that's, you don't want to catch cancer when it's stage 4. You'd rather catch it when it's stage 1. And our emotions can be just as much of a cancer in our life as anything else, because they cause a lot of things to die. That maybe not be a physical death, but your emotions have caused you some relationship deaths. Your emotions have caused you some, maybe some death to some freedoms, some opportunities that you had, some jobs, they can cause you death to a lot of things, okay? And then probably some physical death too. Emotions can cause that. So I'm just trying to get you guys to see the importance of understanding what each one of these emotions is when it comes to the definition or explanation. So I'm going to go slow, but impatience is an uneasiness under pain or suffering that keeps one from enduring affliction. Okay. Everybody say affliction is okay. Say it again. Okay, now everybody say affliction is okay.
Affliction is okay.
Okay. In a lot of aspects, affliction is good for you. David said, "It is good that I have been afflicted." We don't like it. It doesn't feel good, but that's your feelings. All right? And just because something doesn't feel good doesn't mean that it's not good for you. You know that affliction can build character. One of the reasons we have such a emotional crisis in America is because we have created a very coddled society that has no idea how to deal with any type of affliction whatsoever. And so everybody is, just running from any kind of affliction. But what made your grandma so tough and what, such a strong person and such a rock was they were able to go through some affliction and endure it without, running and crying. Make sense? It builds character. It creates a certain amount of good in you, and it causes you. Your affliction will cause you many times to turn to who? Should cause you to turn to who? God. So affliction is okay, and I've got to be able to endure it, and I not only endure it, but I should also embrace it to some degree. You know what I mean? Part of being godly or Christ-like. Did Christ endure affliction?
Yes.
Okay. Did he embrace the affliction? Yes. He embraced it. He accepted it. We need to do the same. We need to endure it, accept it, and embrace it in our life and say, hey, you know what? This is making me more like Christ. Nobody likes it, but you do have to go through it, okay? So impatience is an uneasiness under pain or suffering that keeps one from enduring affliction with composure. All right, that's key. With character, that's key. With poise, Poise. That's key. Without an attitude. Now, because the moment that you lose your composure and you lose your character and you lose your poise is the moment that impatience has overpowered you. Okay? So you don't want impatience to overpower you because now that's what's in control of you, right? So you don't want to lose your poise, you don't want to lose your character, and you don't want to lose your composure, okay? It is usually coupled together with restlessness. How many of us get restless in difficult situations? I'm gonna run. How many of y'all ran? Okay, but you run from one bad situation to the next bad situation. You can't move. You can't run far enough. You can't run fast enough. You can't. There's no running from those things because you're going to run right into more adversity. You're going to run right into more affliction. You're going to run right into, a worse situation more than likely because you made an impatient decision. Usually coupled together with restlessness, impulsiveness, and irritability. An impatient person is normally a very irritable person. One that is void or absent of fortitude. strength, firmness, and surety. There's no steadiness. Okay, so that's the biblical explanation or definition of impatience. Okay, so let me give you a few thoughts with that real quick, and you can write them down if you want to, or you can just listen to them. When impatience gets the best of us, so do our circumstances. When impatience gets the best of us, so do our enemies. When impatience gets the best of us, everyone else gets the worst of us. Just some thoughts about biblical impatience. All right, so I've given you the biblical explanation. Let me give you this. Number 2, the biblical examples of impatience. Examples of impatience, okay? Go to Genesis chapter 13. And you can write down the references, or you can just listen. And just, you don't have to turn there if you want to just listen. It's up to you. But in Genesis 13, we're going to see the impatience of Lot. And we've covered this story a little bit throughout these classes, but I think that, we're going to find that God puts these in here for a reason, because they give us good examples of people that struggle with the same emotions that we struggle with in times of difficulty. And remember, that's what we have to remember. Our emotions get the best of us in the difficult times, not the easy times. It's in the hard times. It's in the valleys, not in the mountaintops, that your emotions. But sometimes your emotions get you on the mountaintop too. Sometimes your emotions can get you in the times of victory as well, and we know that in Scripture as well. But many times it's in the difficult times that our emotions get the best of us. Okay, so this is dealing with Abraham and Lot. And we'll go ahead and begin reading in verse 1. And Abraham went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. So here's the difficulty. There was not a strife between Abram and Lot, but there was a strife between the herdmen that they had with them, the souls that they had brought with them. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou wilt depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan. Now, let's back up. Where was it that God led Abraham to go when it came to the promised land? Where was it that he led him to go? Canaan land. Canaan land is the promised land. It is the land of promise, or the land of victory. Where should Lot have said, I don't care what has to happen, I want to stay? If he would have thought about it for a minute, he's like, you know what? I don't need all this cattle. I don't need all these herdmen. I'll tell you what, I'll get rid of some of what I got in order to stay in the land of promise. But he didn't give it a lot of thought. What he did was he got his eyes on all that land, and this could go into a couple of different emotions, but no matter what, there was a difficult situation, and Lot made a hasty decision. And it did not work out for Lot. It certainly didn't work out for his family. All of his children died except for 2 of his daughters. His wife died. as a result of this hasty decision. He ended up getting taken captive in a war as a result of this hasty decision. He ended up impregnating his 2 daughters, and it could all go back to an emotional decision that was made as a result of impatience, And so that's one. Now look at Genesis chapter 16. We'll see another one. I'm sure we all know this one. The story of Abraham's wife Sarah being impatient with getting that promised seed from the Lord. And she was going to be waiting a long time, so she got impatient real early on in this. She was trying to figure out how to get this thing done now, and how many of us can say, that when we're wanting something right now, or things that we don't have what we have right now, that we can make some impatient decisions that can cost us in the long run. This one would cost everybody, and I say that because of this decision, we still see the ramifications of it even in our day. In all the nations that God said would have their hand against every other nation, and we see that in the the Ishmaelites. That's right, the Ishmaelites. So let's look at that. Genesis chapter 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said unto Abram, Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I pray thee, go in unto my maid, and it may be that I may obtain children by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. No argument. Also a hasty decision. Along with possibly some other decisions that were other emotions, but he should not have done that. And Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. So she's been there 10 years, but, the promise was a child in your old age. And gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarah said unto Abram, My wrong be upon thee. I have given my maid into thy bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. The Lord judgeth between me and thee. But Abram said unto Sarah, Behold, thy maid is in thine hand. Do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarah dealt hardly with her. So you see where impatience will lead you. Okay, now this was not Hagar's fault at all. Hagar was the only one that was not to blame in this, so to speak. Because she was the handmaid of Sarah. Sarah said, Hey, I want you to lie with my husband. I want to get a child by you. She does exactly what she was asked to do. Has this child. It gets impregnated by Abram. And now Sarah's upset because Sarah acted how? Impatiently. And she's upset. This was all her idea. This was all what she wanted. And so, again, it just shows you. Now, fast forward, and all of the people groups that came from this impatient response, an emotional response, are all of Islam. Okay? And so we still see it in this day. Okay? The results of it. So now we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 13. And I believe that somebody spent some time on this a little bit, dealing with Saul's impatience, waiting on, it might have been Pastor Moody. But it might have been somebody teaching on the emotions as well. I can't remember. But 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 1 through 14, Saul gets impatient waiting on Samuel. And so he decides to take matters into his own hands. I will tell you what will happen many times when we get impatient is we will take God's matters into our own hands. That's exactly what Sarah did. That's exactly what Lot did. Lot did not pray. And that's exactly what Saul did. And you just need to wait on the Lord. Okay? In each situation that we're going to look at, impatience got the best of them. Okay? So, 1 Samuel 13.
1 through 14.
Yep. 1 through 14. 1 Samuel 13, 1 through 14. I had a pause there because I was in 2 Samuel and I was like, this isn't the right place. Okay, 1 Samuel 13, 1 through 14. Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose him 3,000 men of Israel, whereof 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in Mount Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan and Gibeah of Benjamin, and the rest of the people he sent every man to his tent. And Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba. And the Philistines heard of it, and Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, Let the Hebrews hear. And all of Israel heard say that Saul had smitten a garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel also had an abomination with the Philistines. And the people were called together after Saul to Gilgal. And the Philistines gathered themselves together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots, and 6,000 horsemen, and people as 1,000, which is on the seashore in multitude. And they came up and pitched in Michmash eastward from Bethaven. Now, in each case, I want you to see, okay, with the impatience, there is a difficult circumstance. Okay, with the impatience, there's some uncomfortableness. How many of y'all think that it'd be a little bit uncomfortable to see 30,000 chariots on the other side? Okay, that's uncomfortable. This doesn't look good for us. We're a brand new nation. I just got made king not even that long ago. This is, at that time, would have been the world power, so it's uncomfortable. Sarah's been left everything she's ever known for 10 years. She hasn't got the child that she thought she was supposed to get. Obviously, she's getting impatient. It's an uncomfortable situation. You know, a lot. There's this strife going on between it. So that uncomfortable situation, that difficult situation, is normally when impatience. So this can help us. All right. So when you're in a difficult or uncomfortable, or you're going through some affliction, you can have somewhat of an expectation of which emotion is going to begin to try to attack you, or which emotion the enemy is going to try to use against you. Right? It's going to be that emotion of impatience to try to get you to respond to according to his will rather than God's will. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, and so let's go ahead and look at verse number 7. And some of the Hebrews went over Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilgal. As for Saul, he was yet in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. And he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. It's getting more difficult. You are more likely to begin to respond impatiently the more difficult the situation gets. And I chose this emotion because I'm going to tell you what, this is an emotion that if I could say one that's got the best of me many times, impatience has got the best of me. And Saul said, Bring hither a burnt offering to me, and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. So just as soon as he finished, now, he tarried there 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed, but Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, Bring it. So I want to back up and read that one more time. And he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed, but Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. And Saul said, Bring hither a burnt offering to me, and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering, and it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, who came? Samuel came. I mean, you made a quick decision, and it was, it wasn't exact. I mean, to me, it seems like it's even in the same day, maybe in the same couple hours. You know what I mean? I don't know how long it took to do it, but, that's just what I'm reading here. And Samuel said, What hast thou done? And Saul said, Because I saw that the people were scattered from me. So because of the difficult situation, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, and the Philistines gathered themselves together at Michmash, begins to give all of his excuses. Therefore said I, the Philistines will come down now upon me to Gilgal, and I have not made supplication unto the Lord. Now he's coming up with all this in his head. This is what's going through his mind. This is his perspective of the situation, but it's all due to the emotion of impatience. He says, I forced myself. I had to make myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering. I basically made me do this, and so that's when you're making yourself the excuse. I don't know, what to make of that, but it's crazy. And so Daniel chapter 2, we're not going to read it. for time's sake, because I'm going to give you a break right after this, but Daniel chapter 2. How about the hastiness? King has a dream and says, I'm not going to tell you guys what the dream was, but I want you guys to give me the interpretation of the dream. And they're all like, all the wise men, all the people that were wise at that time, that were supposed to be able to do this. He said, I'm not going to tell you what the dream is. You give me the interpretation. They said, you tell us the dream, we'll give you the interpretation. He goes, no, I know if I tell you the dream, that you'll make up some false interpretation. He goes, I'm not going to tell you. And they say, well, no, you're asking too much. Nobody's ever asked this of wise men before. Nobody's ever asked this of anybody before. You're asking too much, huh? Huh?
I was just looking at saying like magicians, astrologers.
Yeah, all the magicians, the astrologers, all the wise men of that area. Okay, and so he says, okay, I'm going to put forth a decree to kill every single wise man of the land, all of them. Now, they might not have been able to interpret your dream, but you probably might need some of them later on down the road. I mean, so you talk about a hasty decision to do all that. As a matter of fact, Daniel replied with, why is the king being so hasty in this decision? Give me some time. I'll come back and God can give me the interpretation of the dream. All that being said, that's pretty hasty. You're going to kill every wise person you have in the kingdom? That's foolish. Bless you. Bless you. Amen. And so it was the nation of Israel who had become impatient at the bottom of Mount Sinai, right? And said, we know not what happened or not what has become of this man Moses. And so in their impatience, they're like, we know it was our God that led us out of Egypt. It was our God that led us across the Red Sea. It was our God that has already fed us and already given us water from a rock and done all these other things. It was our God. But you know what? Just make us a different God. Make us one of our old gods. A calf to worship. Something out of gold. I mean, that's pretty hasty. I think the death toll on that one, I think if I'm not mistaken, was like 30,000. You can check it. That's hasty. It was Jacob who was impatient concerning the promise that he would receive the blessing from God that caused him to end up living up to his name, being the supplanter, the liar, and the cheater. Just because your mama tells you to do something wrong doesn't mean you have to do something wrong. Now, you are to obey your authorities until they go against God. But then you ought to obey God rather than man. God does not need our help. God is not behind schedule. Man, impatience will definitely get the best of you when it comes to God's timing. It will cause you to think that, God's just too late, and so I better do something now to make sure. Ask Lazarus. Did Martha think that God was late? Yeah, she sure did. She said, Lord, if you'd have been here. And Jesus said, I am here. No, but if you'd have been here 3 days, I'm here now. But you're too late. God's never too late. Impatience, especially, and write this down, because this is what we're talking about. This is about saved people. You're not here. You didn't come to this program because you're just like everybody else. You came to this program because you're wanting God. At least that's what I believe. Right? And you're a Christian. And you're built different. You're not like everybody else. And so impatience, especially in the kingdom economy. Impatience, especially in the kingdom economy, will cost you big. And that's why the enemy wants us to operate impatiently. That's why. Wants you to think that you don't have time to sit around and pray. Too busy for that. Wants you to think that you've got to jump ship before, you even know how to swim. Yeah. Difficult situations. Have you ever wondered why when you start to go in the right direction, all of a sudden a bunch of difficult things begin to happen around you.
Yes,
All these things trying to cause you to think that you got to quit, you got to go somewhere else. You really got to do this right now. I mean, guys. I mean, this is true no matter what, regardless of what anybody thinks or how they feel. It is true. You start doing something right, and I promise you, there will be things that happen around you to try to get you to respond impatiently to your circumstances right now. When we say I lost my patience or I'm losing my patience, what we should be saying instead, we ought to stop ourselves from saying that. You ought to catch yourself. I'm losing my patience. What you should be saying is I'm about to display my impatience. Because you don't have patience apart from God. It's just not something you were born with. It's just not something that just, it comes from God. Patience is a virtue. You were not born virtuous. You were born again with virtue. And patience comes from God, not us. Okay? So let's stop there, take a break. Yes, Sam?
I just wanted to, you know the story in Esther, how the king, he literally got rid of the queen because he was angry and stuff.
Yeah.
He made that impatient kind of decision, so that just came
Right, exactly. And and there's so many other times, and if anybody else has another example from the Bible where they could think, because there's a ton of them where they operated impatiently. What about, again, let's just go back and look. I know there's a lot, we talk about compounded emotions. What about Elijah, who has the great victory on Mount Carmel? Gets a threat, operates on fear and impatience, also saying, God, just kill me. And like, you are the one that's affecting the whole earth with your prayer life. You know what I mean? And you can go on and on. And so when we get in an emotional state, it's normally like a bunch of emotions that are getting us from a bunch of different angles, but certainly we can see impatience in a lot of it and so forth.
The Jews wasn't patient.
Big time.
Big time.
All the time. Like, they became impatient with Moses often. And every time they learned a lesson. And it was usually one that involved death.
Show something.
Yeah, there's only a couple times where God didn't do anything. You know what I mean? But after that, God got tired of their impatience and their complaining and their murmuring and their discontentment, and we see all those different emotions kind of coming together. But just remember, all those emotions, like you start giving place to one emotion, before you know that, you started giving place to discontentment. That discontentment can lead to anger. That anger can lead to, bitterness, all these different emotions, and we get to become overwhelmed by all of our emotions. So, but just trying to look at the ones that we probably tend to deal with the most. So we'll stop there, and we'll come back and look at some biblical excerpts that tell us not to give place to impatience.